What's up, everyone? Hardcore here. In the past, we talked about some of the drama and issues that often happens in Final Fantasy XIV. Today, we are going to talk about the Dark Knight class skill issues and the drama surrounding the class. Joining me here, Kaiser and Sigma 6. Oh, you wanna
Hola.
start, Kaiser?
Hello.
Hello. So, this is one that I've kind of been wanting to do for a while because while it's not the first job I played, it was one of the jobs that I became the most attached to when it was added. I've talked about how I started back in A Realm Reborn. I started as a Lancer. I gave up Lancer after Dragoon, and my friends started playing. Someone else was a Dragoon. So I decided to go Bard. Well, Heaven's Word comes around, and they had showed off the three new jobs Astrologian, Machinist, and Dark Knight. When they added Dark Knight in, I kid you not, the queue times for DPS was the same as tanks and healers now. It was instant. If you waited a minute and you were in. Everybody was playing Astro, but everybody and the people you didn't even know played were playing Dark Knight. There was parties out in the world leveling Dark Knight to 50, just doing fates. And it was awesome. Dark Knight was powerful because it was obviously a new class, so the kit was new. They had it all, for this expansion. And then comes Stormblood. They changed a lot of it. They changed a lot of spells around, took some out because they were adding in the roll system. And everybody probably knows what that is. When you choose a role, you get certain abilities. Well, for tanks, you get low blow and reprisal. And these used to be the Dark Knight abilities. So low blow being the stun, and they took it away from Dark Knight, but still gave it back to him, but as the roll. And then you also now had where paladins had two kicks, and they were the only ones that had two kicks. But this also led to some major issue. At least at the start of Stormblood, the tanks were they were squishy. The first dungeon, you were running through and you felt, especially for me, because I was running through it as a Dark Knight. I felt like I was just wearing paper. I was taking that much damage. And it got better by the end of the story because you're getting the new gear, you're getting stronger, you're getting new ability. And then it came to the Omega Raid. And when you ran it, the last fight against X-Death, and you're trying to learn all of his abilities and everything, realize, oh, there's a tank swap. If you were playing as a Dark Knight, you had Blackest Night, which was amazing back then. It was one of their biggest things, and it didn't affect them as much having Blackest Night as it did in Shadowbringers, but I'll get to that. But fighting X-Death, he comes up with the lightning that you have to swap off of. You put up Blackest Night, you're fine. You're not dying. It barely tickles. And this also led into, with the squishy tanks, this has been a ongoing issue. I've had friends that have been main healers since A Realm Reborn. They dislike healing Dark Knights anymore. Back in Heaven's Word, perfectly fine. Stormblood, it was an issue, but nothing you couldn't get past. Then Shadowbringers comes along, and Dark Knight pretty much gets swept under the rug, along with, I think, Warrior was kind of swept under there for Paladin and Gunbreaker. Gunbreaker being the new big thing. And one of the issues was just everybody else, for all the other tanks, they all had a proper self heal. And this was where, um, this is what hurt the Dark Knight the most, was the lack of a proper self heal. The ongoing issue with that has led to more and more. I feel that just I don't see a lot of Dark Knight players. There's probably still a lot of people out there that play them, but most of the time it's Warrior, it's
Oh yeah.
Gunbreaker, Paladin.
Especially now and since Endwalker, when they made
Mm-hmm.
changes, a lot of healers, especially me, and like I'm talking of about my side. I used to heal Dark Knights. I'm like, okay, what's the fuss? What did change? What did they change about it? So I
Mm-hmm.
tried healing Dark Knight on Astrologian, and I kind of struggled at the beginning of the expansion. So I'm like, maybe it's because every first time the expansion when it comes out, usually they have to change some stuff or add stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm like, well, I'm still struggling. What's going on? Turns out they changed it and people were kind of salty about it. Oh, we can't heal Dark Knights. We can't do shit. Like, Dark Knights are becoming harder to heal. Like, they can't heal themselves. They don't have mitigation that much or good mitigations. And people were like, hey, get good, Dark Knights, whatever. The, the players that play Dark Knight have nothing to do. That's just how the class is built.
Mm-hmm. So with proper healing, I mean I have seen every other tank in any dungeon solo a boss. Party wipe, tank is the only person left. 25% health, 50% health. The tank is the only person left, and they can solo the fight. Dungeon, mind you, not like trial raid, nothing. Dungeon boss, so like second, last boss kind of thing. Dark Knight does not have the self heal to get through it. And their biggest thing from Stormblood, Blackest Night, took a nerf in the form of the other three tanks getting something similar to it and making their version better. It uh, takes more of a hit than Blackest Night, or it adds in something extra on top like Blackest Night, but maybe I think for Gunbreakers theirs is a um, heal. So whoever they put it on, they do an attack, they heal, and that's the other. They've made the playstyles um, kind of overlap in some regards with the tanks, that you can pick one up after playing another and it doesn't take as long to get used to it. Yes, they're all going to have their own playstyles. Dark Knights and Gunbreakers are going to have a bit more diversity to their builds of what they can do. Same for Warrior, and Paladin has always been more of the defense oriented tank, whereas Dark Knight has always been more of the DPS. And then same for Warrior, same for Gunbreaker. That was that's how I've always felt they were. But Paladin still can push out the damage. Um but again, it the lacking of self-healing is one of the biggest detriments, because no matter how many um, buffs you get, there's always that issue that once you run out of buffs, that's it. You can't do it. Or your buffs, I mean your defense cooldowns, once you run out of those, you you're out of it. You have to wait and hope that your healer can keep going. And if they're
Well,
gone,
Here's the thing. What about the Living Dead? They made changes for
So
that too. You can argue with it.
so that yeah. So I know Dark Knight has some heals. They have their Soul Eater, which is their third in their rotation for their normal damage rotation. That does heal. Doesn't heal for enough, if you ask me. If that's going to be their bread and butter self heal, it's not even to enough. You also have Abyssal Drain. But the problem with the Abyssal Drain is twofold. One, it only is good against mob pulls. If you use it on a boss, it's weaker than Soul Eater, but when you're in a mob pull, if you pull twice and you use Abyssal Drain, you will probably get all of your health if you are near death. It's that powerful. And that is great. But then it's on a 60-second cooldown. And to make matters worse, for a DPS tank, it also shares with Carve and Spit. So now you have to decide in boss fights or anything if you're having issues getting more health back because, like we said in the last one, sometimes your healers, they don't want to heal. Now you have to decide, do I try to get a bit back from Abyssal Drain in a boss fight where it's almost meaningless, or do you go for more damage from Carve and Spit? And yes, Living Dead, they did allow you to get health back, but I'm sorry, no amount of self-heal is worth coming on that or being attached to that tank involved.
Oh yeah, it's
It's
still
the
not
only
enough.
one.
Yeah.
It's the only one that can kill you. Yes, maybe it is enough to get you out of that death zone, but I'm sorry, it is still. From the moment they added it, I have disliked it. Super Boli has gotten people killed, but the fact that it, even in Heaven's Ward, your healers had to save Benediction just for that moment. Just for when the Dark Knight tank went in Vuln and they are dropped to zombie mode and they need the health. Again, having a large number of barriers at the end of the day doesn't save you. It can save you from, if you can manage it well enough, it can save you pole to pole, but you have to be on the money every single pole. You have to be watching and calculating every single second that you're going to be using your cooldowns. And maybe there is somebody out there that has done the math, done the time to finding it. But for a pick up and play sort of play style for just the average MMO players, you are not going to look that up to try and make that work or min-max your defense cooldowns just for a pull.
And that's where the drama comes in and be like, oh, Dark Knight sucks. Dark Knight is not a good class to play. It's like, the class is good. Like, every class have its issues.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, no class is good enough. Like, every class has its issues, like we said.
Yeah, I'm really hoping it gets another rework, kind of how Summoner got the rework this expansion.
Yeah, I've actually seen in certain contents when I did play, I was, very active at one point, but I haven't been as active within the last year or so. I think I've made a mention of that in probably one of the other previous videos. But from my experiences with a lot of like the high level dungeons and stuff, it's become such an issue because it's almost gotten to the point to where Dark Knights and Warriors basically have been phased out of content. To where if you're going to run that content, it was like, well, you better bring either your Gunbreaker or your Paladin to run the content. Because with a lot of healers, especially ones that I see in higher end content, they're trying to multitask mainly between DPS and trying to heal. And
Yep.
Warriors are really, really good at healing, but they trade off damage for heals. So they can do their self-heal rotation, and do
Yeah.
their damage reductions, but they
Warriors got
sacrifice.
Yeah, Warriors got the super heals when it
Yeah,
comes to self healing. I mean, when Endwalker came out and the raid was first added, somebody went in there solo as a warrior from 100% to boss dead
yeah,
by
and
themselves.
warriors are crazy. I mean, and it's weird that the fact that warriors have almost been phased out of content because of the fact that they can heal. But a lot of those, if you're running like savages and stuff like that, a lot of it you have to worry about basically squad wipes if you're not doing enough damage at certain phases. So
Mm-hmm.
warriors, because they're trading off damage for heals, then they're not outputting enough damage to where they're making these cutoffs. So it's almost like, well, they get to heal, but then they're trading their damage for the war, like for the white mages and the red mages and stuff like that, to pick up the slack on their or on their offensive end. So a lot of characters like, oh, well, we'd much rather have a gunbreaker. They can kind of gunbreaker's a really good middle class tank. It's really good at DPSing, but it's also pretty good at healing and basically squad protection. So
Yeah.
it can kind of mitigate all three of those. But then but Dark Knight, I've seen people literally, and like I said, Final Fantasy is probably one of the better communities as far as, being, I would say, an open and welcome kind of community. But you also have those people, especially in Savage Gears and a lot of the top tier raids, they want to be spot on. And you come in with the Dark Knight, I've seen people get bullied until they left because they're like, well, you chose this, your gear isn't really this. I mean, it doesn't really matter if they're really really up to code with knowing how to tank as a Dark Knight. As soon as they come in, they're like, bro, don't you have any other classes that you can use? I've seen people get bullied out of groups where they left party finders because of the fact that they were Dark Knights, because of the fact that mages just don't want to heal them, because of their ability to keep themselves alive while the healers are trying to mitigate heals and focus on DPS. They kind of leave Dark Knights to their own devices, and then I've seen whole party wipes because of the
Mm-hmm.
fact that they're like, well, get good, Dark Knight, because you're a tank. You're supposed to mitigate this, but they're so used to playing in parties where you're playing is, you have, your gunbreakers and your paladins are really good at self-healing and keeping themselves off the floor. They just kind of forget about Dark Knights. And then when everything's all said and done, they're dumping so much MP and just trying to heal the Dark Knights, and then they can't DPS, or they over DPS and don't have enough MP to save the Dark Knight, where the Dark Knight has to use, their invuln. And like you
Oh,
said,
yeah.
I've seen plenty of squad wipes happen because they get in that zombie form, and then that's it. The whole
Yep.
party wipes.
And it's
So
for any of them. You know, uh, paladins, they can sit there. Yes, they gotta charge it, but until they run out of mana, which, to be honest, what's a paladin using all of its mana for?
yeah,
They're
I've
not
never seen a
sitting there.
paladin use their whole mana.
They're not sitting there casting all the time because they're a tank. They're smacking things. If they're using their mana, it's when it's an instant cast for their spells. For uh, warrior, they just have so much sustain with healing. There's a lot in their kit built for that. And then for Gunbreaker, you have your regen from your Aurora, and then they also have something similar to Soul Eater. Now, it's not as strong a cure as Soul Eater, but it also has where it creates a barrier to nullify some of the damage that is given by the heal, which is great. And you tie that in with uh, their version of Blackest Night, their Heart of Corodium, and there's more to it. If they both stack, you're getting more. So everybody else has so much more healing to their kit that it's pushed the Dark Knight out in most regards. Some groups will still take warriors because they just have that better sustain, and some groups will take Dark Knights because they just have that high DPS. But at the end of the day, is that high DPS worth them pretty much giving up the tank role which they are supposed to play, meaning that they have nowhere to play in. You know, it, it's like the kid in the sandbox. The Dark Knight is set up to be a DPS, but he can't play with the DPS. He has to play in the tank sandbox, but he can't because he just can't last with them.
Yeah, with how they structured the content, it's almost like the devs they accidentally phased out Dark Knight. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, like especially at top tier content, you rarely see Dark Knights run in unless you have a really good skill group that they're very confident in your abilities. But oftentimes they overstack heals so that way they can help subsidize in case of something happens. Because
Yeah.
let's face it, we've all played high tier content where you make a plan and that plan just goes foobar right out of the door. So they will overstack on heals, but it's one of those balancing acts. If your tank is up to par and they know the routine, they know the mechanics, then it's like by the razor's edge. And sometimes you can have everything run perfectly and still just miss the mark. And I think most people, if you're running things like Ultimate or the Bahamut stuff, you know all that stuff, when you're running all these different phases where you have to be almost like perfect, they just don't take Dark Knights because that level or that ability to make it on time is so thin that most of the time you get a lot of people. It's like, hey, look, I mean, when they're in Party Finder, they'll specifically put for tanks or gun breakers because they want those abilities and they want those. I mean, and sometimes you even see with warriors because, like you said, those guys are great at self healing.
Yeah. And yeah, that's the big thing is that if the devs have phased out Dark Knight, either it was just an accident or they didn't know what to do with it. Because, like I said, they changed its kit in Stormblood, and back in Stormblood, it did get better, but it's kind of stagnated from there. It didn't hit a higher elevation. It pretty much plateaued right at the end of Stormblood. And everything else is just almost like a crate that's just sitting on the plateau that Dark Knight is at to try and reach everything else. So they're just making stairs out of crates where everybody else, they plateaued for the expansion that they need to, and then they went up, and it kept going. It's like a mountain, and Dark Knight is just made of crates at this point. It's being held together, but it's not doing anything,
Yeah, it's like
and it's sad.
they spawned the meme that Dark Knight is just a DPS. It doesn't know what it wants. It's not a tank.
I mean, if this was Final Fantasy XI, Dark Knight being a DPS would be understandable because that's what it was.
You read my mind because I was actually about to bring that up because at the place where it is now, it was like Dark Knight is kind of what Ninja was in Final Fantasy XI. Like Ninja was always meant to be a DPS in Final Fantasy XI, but the ability for it to mitigate damage by not getting hit. Anybody who's ever played Final Fantasy XI, we used to call that blink tanking because of the fact that blinks, you make shadow clones and they absorb damage, which means if you can't get hit, then that makes you a pretty good tank if you can't get hit. It's the opposite of being able to absorb damage, but it's the ability to mitigate damage by missing attacks. So ninjas were pretty decent at it, but it was one of those jobs that you have to have a lot of money because you used to have to spend a lot just to blink tank. Because unlike this game, all your resources, arrows, bullets, tools, you had to purchase or make them your own. So Ninja was never meant to be a tank, but it filled the role of being a tank. But most of the time, people will much rather have the ninja job to be an actual DPS, the job that it was designed for. And it's kind of like that in this version of the game. It's like they wanted Dark Knight to be a tank, but then it gave them the abilities of a DPS class, and it was kind of like, here, you're a pseudo tank. You have the ability to tank and to absorb damage, but at the same time, all your skills are more likely to be used as DPS. Now, you've taken a DPS role as a warrior and gave them the ability to trade off either a rotation for damage or a rotation for heals. And it still plays a lot like a DD instead of a tank. But because of the fact that you have those abilities to either self-medicate heals or to do damage and trade between the two, it feels like a proper tank. Just like you have with Paladin. They can do damage physically, they can do damage with magic, and they have the abilities to heal themselves and all the proper mitigation to absorb and to deflect damage. So they have all the proper tools. And it's just kind of like Dark Knight's just there. It's like the ninja of Final Fantasy XI. It was a tank, but it was never meant to be a tank. And you're kind of in a, it's like the middle child. You're kind of stuck in between the two. You get the benefits of being the middle child because, you know, the older has to do everything, the youngest doesn't have to do anything. So you kind of just ride in the middle. But at the same time, you never really fully expand because you're always stuck in the middle. And people would rather have the the best tank classes to run these contents, or they'll suffice for like a warrior class. But when it comes to Dark Knights, it's kind of like you're overlooked, and you can find it in a lot of stuff when you're looking through those party finders. When especially the people that's creating them has very specific job roles, and most of the time you'll always see Paladin, and I would probably say outside of Paladin, you'll always see a Gunbreaker slot for those roles. You will hardly ever see Dark Knight, which is weird because Dark Knight has some of the craziest abilities. It's super flashy. I mean, it's such a dope, just like gothic job, and it's just like they're outproduced by actual DDs, but then they're also outproduced by actual tanks. So it's just kind of like they look flashy, but at this point they're literally a glass cannon. They look cool, but they don't really serve a purpose. It doesn't serve the needs. And it's just like what Kaiser was saying. It seems like all the other jobs have benefited from it and has grown beyond what Dark Knight is. I mean, because all these other tanking jobs basically had similar abilities that were spawned off of the Dark Knight's ability. But then outside of that, it was like all those abilities, like all these other like tank jobs and even some DPS jobs have kind of cherry picked out of the Dark Knight pool and then left. It was like if you have an all-you-can-eat buffet, or like a table full of food, and all these characters come by and pick off everything from it and then leave. The Dark Knight's kind of sitting there with the leftovers. Everybody gets all the good stuff, and they get better. Yeah, and then Dark Knight just kind of just sit there like they came and took the abilities that were unique to me, but now I have these same abilities, but it never gets expanded on because as those expansions come in, they make those abilities better to suit that DLC that as it comes through to get those reworks. And it just seems like every time these jobs get reworked, it makes them better. But at the same time, they make these reworks to Dark Knight, it makes it weaker. So it's just like, what were the point?
The rework was back in Stormblood, and part of it was to get rid of dots. They've been working to get rid of dots from the game for a while. The last one now, I think, is Gunbreaker and Bard.
Yeah.
I don't know of anybody else that has one off the top of my head. And I find it funny because Dark Knight, their level 6 ability, Scourge from Heaven's Word, was a dot. And then that got taken away in Stormblood. It's like, oh, you know that ability that you had that you apply dots? Yeah, you've completely forgotten about it now. We don't know how, but you've just forgotten about it.
Yeah.
Like,
but yeah, I just hope that one day they actually fix some of the issues, but I think we've reached the limit now. But
I was gonna add in one thing. Just the fact of, with talking about the older skill kits, I always thought Monk was going to be a tank, or that they were going to change it over to a tank, because it had things in its kit that made it feel like it could be a tank, but they never did. And then they changed it, took those out, now it's just a DPS.
Oh, yeah.
Because you had the different fists. You had Fist of Fire for damage, Fist of Wind for running, and Fist of Earth for taking less damage.
Yeah.
I'm glad you mentioned that because I think Monk would have been an interesting, like like Red Mage. It's a jack of all trades kind of job, and I thought Monk would have been able to do that, especially with those fists. They really could have taken advantage of those battle stances, because it could have been a tank with a tank stance. It could have been a DPS with a DPS stance, and it could have had what Warrior has with a healing stance, where you trade off damage for heals.
Yep.
That would have been very interesting, because Red Mage is basically a white mage and a black mage, and it also specializes in buffs and debuffs.
It would have been the 11 ninja of 14.
Yeah, it would have been a physical side to the magic side with the red mage would have been, and that would have been awesome. You know, it wouldn't have been the greatest tank, but in case, you know, if the party wipes or something like that, it can change out of a DPS stance to a tank stance until the party gets itself up. Yep. Or it can, you know, it can keep damage off of everybody else while it heals, while the white mages and stuff like that can start raising everybody. I think that would have been awesome. But then when they changed that, it took that ability away. And I thought that would have been a really, really interesting choice if they did a jack of all trades for offense like they did with the back roll jobs with Red Mage.
Yeah.
But yeah,
no, that's just a funny thing.
Let us know what you guys think in the comments, or what do you think about the classes, especially Dark Knight. But I'm gonna have to end it here. So thank you guys for watching, and Kaiser and Sigma for joining. As always, I'm gonna see you guys in the next video. Make sure to follow the links. I have a Twitch. They also have Kick if you wanna follow us there too. But I'll see you guys in the next video. Take care.
Bye.
Deuces.